We need to talk about restructuring your estate. Now, not after you're gone. Vivienne set it across my own dinner table, setting her fork down like she was closing an argument rather than opening one. I set my own fork down slower. Restructuring it how exactly? $87 million, Harlan. Sitting there doing nothing while Bradford and I struggle to give our kids the life they actually deserve. It's time some of that came to us. Now, while it can actually help. My name is Harlan Voss. I'm 81. Retired oil equipment manufacturer, Midland, Texas. In the evening my daughter-in-law demanded access to a fortune I'd spent 60 years building was the same evening my attorney walked through my front door holding a folder that made her stop talking entirely. I hadn't invited him. Not that night, anyway. But I'd asked him, 3 weeks earlier, to handle something quietly, something I'd been circling for longer than I wanted to admit, and apparently he'd chosen that particular Tuesday evening to deliver it. I want to back up a little, because none of what happened next makes sense without understanding how we got to that dinner table in the first place. I built my company from a single rented machine shop back in 1968, manufacturing drilling equipment for the oil fields scattered across West Texas. 60 years of careful work, careful decisions, careful money. Right up until I sold the company 4 years ago for a number that still doesn't feel entirely real to me some mornings. I never changed how I lived. Same modest house I bought in 1979. Same truck, traded in every decade or so for another one just like it. Bradford grew up comfortable, never wanting, but never surrounded by the kind of obvious wealth that tends to change how a young man sees the world. Then he married Vivienne, 8 years ago, and somewhere along the way, I think she did the math on exactly what comfortable might eventually mean once the right pieces fell into place. Over the past year especially, the questions had started. Casual at first, about my will, about how things were structured, then less casual. Comments about how unfair it seemed that Bradford's own children might not benefit from any of it until I was gone, potentially decades away given how healthy I still was. I'd brushed it off, mostly, telling myself family talks about these things sometimes, nothing unusual in it. Sitting at that dinner table, hearing her say the actual number out loud, so plainly, so confidently, I understood I'd been brushing off something considerably more serious than ordinary family curiosity. Vivienne, that's not really a conversation for the dinner table. Then when, Harlan? You keep putting it off. Bradford's too polite to push, but I'm not. We deserve to actually benefit from this money while we're young enough to enjoy it, not wait around for you to die first. Bradford, beside her, stared at his plate, saying nothing at all. Bradford, I said, do you agree with this? He hesitated. Dad, I think Vivienne raises some fair points. It's just sitting there. We could really use some of it now. I felt something settle heavy in my chest, hearing my own son echo a demand that, 3 weeks earlier, I'd already quietly begun protecting myself against, though I hadn't fully admitted to myself yet exactly why. That's when the doorbell rang. I hadn't invited anyone. I excused myself and answered it, finding my attorney, Desmond Crowell, standing on my porch, a leather folder tucked under one arm, looking slightly apologetic for the timing. Harlan, I know this isn't the best moment, but the paperwork finalized today, and given everything you told me last month about the pressure building at home, I thought you'd want this in hand sooner rather than later. I let him in. Vivienne's face, when Desmond walked into that dining room, shifted through something complicated, confusion first, then a kind of wary calculation. Who is this? This is Desmond, my attorney, I said. Desmond, this is Vivienne. She was just explaining how she'd like to restructure my estate. Desmond, to his credit, kept his expression perfectly neutral. Mr. Voss asked me to handle something a few weeks back, he said, setting the folder on the table. I believe the timing works out rather conveniently, given the conversation I understand is already underway. He opened the folder. 3 weeks ago, Harlan asked me to establish an irrevocable trust, Desmond said, transferring the majority of his estate, including the mineral rights, the original manufacturing property, and the bulk of his liquid assets, into a structure designed specifically for his grandchildren's education and a charitable foundation supporting trade school scholarships in this region. The room went very quiet. Irrevocable, Vivienne repeated slowly, like the word itself tasted wrong in her mouth. That's correct, Desmond said. Once established, the terms cannot be altered, not by Harlan, and certainly not by anyone else. The trust activated formally as of this morning. So the money's just gone? Locked away. Not gone, Desmond said. Simply protected, in the way Harlan felt was most appropriate, given his goals for the next generation. Vivienne turned to me, her composure cracking properly for the first time since I'd known her. You did this without even discussing it with us? I discussed it with myself, mostly, I said. The same way I built the company in the first place, quietly, without waiting for anyone else's permission to protect what I'd worked for. This affects Bradford too, Harlan. Your own son. Bradford will inherit generously, I said. That was never in question. But $87 million handed over on demand, at a dinner table, 3 weeks after I first started hearing you count it out loud like a shopping list, that was never something I was willing to do. Bradford finally looked up from his plate. Dad, is that really what this looked like to you? Vivienne counting it like a shopping list. Son, that's exactly what it looked like. The silence that followed lasted long enough that Desmond quietly excused himself, saying he'd leave the paperwork with me to review at my own pace, and let himself out. Vivienne left shortly after, saying she needed air, though I suspected she mostly needed somewhere private to process what had just happened to her carefully rehearsed plan. Bradford stayed. We sat at that table a long while, neither of us saying much at first. Dad, I should have said something sooner, he finally admitted. The pressure's been building at home for months. Vivienne's parents have money too, and I think she's been comparing us to them constantly, feeling like we're falling behind somehow, even though we're not exactly struggling. Are you struggling, Bradford? Honestly, no, he said quiet. We're not. I think I let her convince me we should be doing better than we are, and somewhere along the way I stopped questioning whether that comparison actually made any sense for our own life. I told him I understood the pull of that kind of comparison better than he probably realized, even at 81 years old. But Bradford, demanding money at a dinner table isn't a conversation. It's an ultimatum, and I built everything I have specifically so nobody could ever put me in that position again. He nodded slowly, and for the first time that evening, actually looked like he was hearing me rather than simply waiting for his turn to speak. Over the following weeks, Bradford and Vivienne had, by his account, several difficult conversations of their own. She came to see me eventually, about 3 weeks later, considerably calmer, and offered something close to an actual apology, admitting she'd let comparison and fear about the future push her into a demand she recognized, in hindsight, hadn't been fair to anyone at that table. I told her I appreciated her saying so, and that going forward, actual conversations would matter to me considerably more than demands ever could. The trust itself remains exactly as Desmond structured it, fully irrevocable, funding scholarships now for kids across West Texas who need the same kind of practical trade education that let me build a machine shop into something worth $87 million in the first place. Bradford's children, my grandchildren, have education accounts properly established too. Generous ones, though structured carefully enough that no single dinner table demand could ever threaten their security the way that Tuesday evening threatened everything else about our family. It's been about 7 months now. Bradford visits more often these days, sometimes with Vivienne, sometimes just himself, and our conversations feel more honest than they have in years, less performance, more substance. Last month, I attended the first scholarship ceremony the foundation funded, watching a group of young trade school graduates walk across a stage, tools in hand instead of the usual academic gowns, each one receiving enough support to start their own careers without the crushing debt so many of their generation carries. Bradford came with me, sat beside me the whole ceremony, and afterward, watching those young graduates celebrate with their families, he turned to me with something in his expression I hadn't seen in longer than I wanted to admit. Dad, this is better than any number could have been, he said. I think I finally understand what you were actually protecting that night. I told him that meant more to me than the $87 million ever could on its own. Because some fortunes, I've learned, aren't really about the number sitting in an account at all. They're about what that number can quietly become, once you finally decide who deserves the chance to build something real with it. If this story got to you, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe for more. I'll see you in the next one.